Welcome to the Altruistic Libertarian, advocate for a genuinely free society. I'm Anthony Wheeler, and today we complete our sequence on the proper role of government. Private-public distinction. Living in a genuinely free society doesn't mean individuals can do anything they want anywhere they happen to be. Certain public standards would be enforced relative to specific behavior and dress. Laws restricting nudity, public displays of affection, drug, alcohol abuse, rude or disruptive behavior would be appropriate. Once inside the privacy of one's own home, however, no restrictions among consenting adults would be enacted or enforced. Nudity, drugs, sex, gambling, reading anything, writing anything, viewing anything would be allowed. Unless such activity violated GFS principles, i.e. intentionally harming someone without their permission, or gross negligence, or negatively impacted their neighbors, loud parties say, it would be legal and permitted. Red light district zoning principle. Within a genuinely free society, undesirable commercial entertainment establishments will operate somewhere. Casinos, whorehouses, recreational drug bars, strip clubs, liquor stores, and cigarette sales, for example. Many communities will wish to exclude such entities from their boundaries. While general rules concerning schools and residential areas would apply, the red light zoning principle would stipulate that bans on such activities could only be enacted if a non-banned area for those activities existed within a defined distance, say within 10 miles or so. If such a place existed that catered to these undesirable activities within the limit, or allowed such commercial activity, the community could ban them from their own commercial zones. Children, age of consent, and competency. Children form a special case within a generally free society, as they do in today's society. In many ways, they would be treated the same way as they are today, and protected by the law from unhealthy influences, drugs, alcohol, smoking, required to attend school until the age of 16, and restricted from many adult activities until they reach the age of consent. The age of consent might range anywhere from as young as 16 to as old as 19. Whatever age legally established, an individual would gain full adult rights on their birthday and become completely free to behave as an adult. The only exception to this rights granted an individual at the age of consent would be for those adults illegally classified as incompetent. This designation might be used for those mentally challenged or adults that require the same care as a child. Immigration. Immigration becomes much simpler in a genuinely free society, as there would be no tariffs, import quotas, illegal drugs worth smuggling, or social services to be taken advantage of. Basic screening against violence criminals and potential terrorists would suffice, allowing all law-abiding and respectful immigrants to enter the country. Schools would be privately owned, welfare wouldn't exist, immigrants would be obligated to provide for themselves and their own children. Opportunities would be abundant, drawing needed labor and expertise from other countries. Threats from terrorists would decline after America withdraws military from so many places. Crimes against people and property would be more difficult to effect given the total commitment of community police forces against such crime. With drugs, prostitution, and gambling no longer criminal activities, the attraction to organized crime would be greatly reduced, turning large numbers of formal criminals into law-abiding, tax-paying, unarmed citizens. A major part of the historical greatness of the United States is based on significant waves of immigration. Today is no different. A diverse, culturally heterogeneous social injection serves everyone's interest by providing new talent, energy, and differing perspectives. As for all those white nationalists out there, they are simply wrong. Nobody is actually threatened by difference. Nothing is inherently special about being white. Monetary policy. Gold standard, borrowing, deficit spending. For reasons we covered in episodes 5 and 6, the government's primary monetary policy should be to maintain a stable money supply, a supply that increases commensurate with the expansion of the economy as a whole. Doing so would result in a general stability of prices. In a generally free society, while the government has a definite role in maintaining a stable money supply, the government should be legally prohibited from deficit spending, that is, spending more than tax receipts, or borrowing from the public, other than for short-term, say for cash flow coverage. Deficit spending, whether funded through borrowing or printing more money, fundamentally weakens the economy in insidious ways, given the necessarily ambiguous relationship between cause and effect. It allows politicians to spend more without direct consequence, even as such spending erodes the value of currency or robs capital markets of resources that otherwise would be productively invested. Without explicit legal limits to deficit spending, the risk and the current reality of the government abusing their monetary powers will continue without abatement. Some people advocate returning to a gold standard in order to ensure the government complies with responsible monetary policy. Doing so may create additional costs and economic friction that isn't necessary to realize monetary goals, putting brakes or causing volatility where none are required. Also, given that gold, or any other monetary standard, such as silver, is a commodity in its own right, and therefore subject to market fluctuations, implementing a strict gold standard would create unnecessary volatility in the money supply. In other words, a strict gold standard would cost more than it would necessarily benefit, especially if the required monetary restrictions were duly enforced on the government, making such gold standards unnecessary. Capital punishment. Capital punishment violates the basic principle of the genuine free society when it deliberately executes a person without immediate threat. In terms of protecting society, the same can be accomplished through imprisonment. The government should be held to the same standard as individuals and only kill when in direct and immediate danger. Allowing state executions under any circumstances should give every citizen pause. They should be illegal for anyone, anywhere. Gun control. The original purpose of the Second Amendment no longer pertains. Consider the actual wording. This is a quote from the Constitution. A well-regulated militia being necessary to the security of a free state, the right of the people to keep and bear arms shall not be infringed. Unquote. When written, an armed citizen stood as protection from a tyrannical government because the citizen and the government soldier were similarly armed. With an armed citizenry, absolute limits were placed on government. Today, this is no longer the case. The government possesses arms far superior to anything privately owned, and the citizen with his pistol or rifle no match for Army Rangers. Besides, the real risk to government control lies elsewhere, in the ubiquity of personal information, that is credit cards, GPS trackers, communication surveillance, that is email, phone calls, text messaging, social media, and the pending disappearance of cash money. Being armed won't help when the government knows everything you purchase, everywhere you go, and everything you do. When getting off the grid becomes impossible because all and everywhere is grid. The only genuine solution to a gridlocked future and to the impending threat of a tyrannical government is the establishment of a genuinely free society. All the guns in the world won't do. As for the world today, the level of gun violence in the U.S. is alarming. Mass shootings in schools, shopping malls, and theaters. Most places in the world do not experience such violence. In some cases, where publicly owned firearms largely don't exist, Japan, the UK, Australia for instance, mass shootings no longer take place, if they ever did. Such an option does not exist in the U.S. In our current society, it would be impossible or impossibly bloody to remove all privately owned firearms. As a gun owner, I too would resist such an effort. We are a gun culture, and that's unlikely to change anytime soon. The vast majority of gun owners are responsible and non-violent. In fact, to my knowledge, those gun enthusiasts who arm themselves as if they anticipate protracted combat, assault rifles, military-grade munitions, haven't been responsible for any significant gun violence in this country. But what can we do about the gun violence rampant in the country? I don't know, and I haven't heard any compelling argument that addresses the root cause of mass shootings. In episode 27, I suggest legalizing drugs to drastically reduce gun violence associated with the illegal drugs. So that might be part of the answer. Yes, eliminating all firearms in the country would probably work, but as I've already indicated, that is not an option. But eliminating or restricting the sale of certain types of weapons won't solve the problem either, as all forms of guns have been used in mass shootings. I don't know the answer. I suppose in a generally free society, we will retain possession of our firearms along with the illusion of independence that goes with it. But if I had the opportunity, I would be willing to trade in my guns in exchange for genuine freedom. Well, that concludes our show for today and our sequence on the proper role of government. Next time, we look at wars and rumors of war. Until then, peace.